And as they used to say, all is well. So just to repeat that, Thursday, July the 23rd, and all is well, and I pray it is with you too. I know there are many needs, and I know that there are some of you going through tough times. I've just been reading some of the prayer requests and listening to some of the phone calls, and I know that there are many needs. But I pray that despite all of that, you're living with the fruit of the Spirit. And we've talked about two of them so far, two of the aspects of that fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5, verse 22 says that the fruit of the Spirit is love. We talked about that, joy, and today, peace. And, I know a number of you are going through tough times. I know some are waiting for medical procedures, and it's tough when you're waiting for something like that to have peace. Others I know are dealing with the loss of a loved one. And how do you have peace in the middle of that? So I mentioned to Denise a few minutes ago that I was going to talk about peace. I mean, she could have predicted it because she knows what the fruit of the Spirit are or is, but she said, well, that'll be interesting, because last night I guess she got a little, I wouldn't say annoyed with me, but she was a little stressed because I was stressed. Maybe you can relate. I ended up on a conversation that really I thought was going to take 10 minutes. I called somebody that we do business with, as privately. This is not the company, but I called them and I said, hey, what I contracted with you to do, I'm still having to pay for, but you've changed what you're supplying. And so I got pretty irate about it. And she said, and she was right, forget it, you're not going to get anywhere. So actually I spent an hour and 15 minutes on the phone talking to this person and then to their supervisor and all the rest of it. And everybody agreed it was not right, but nobody wanted to fix it, or nobody said they had the means to fix it. So in her mind, in Denise's mind, that meant that I wasn't at peace. Well, I guess I wasn't. There are many different types of peace, many applications of peace. The application that most of the world think about when you talk about peace is they think what happens following a war. Well, two nations are at war and one defeats the other, and we hear that peace has been declared. Well, is that true? If all that peace was the absence of fighting, then yeah, that would be true. But the reality is that peace that all it is paper thin, that peace is going to shatter. You and I both know of examples in the world where there's been peace, allegedly, but after 10, 20, 50 years, the nations are still loggerheads, they're still at cross purposes. Okay, they're not openly fighting, but there's sure not peace between them. I read this week that during the past 4,000 and some years, there's only been 268 years where there wasn't a war somewhere in the world. And in the last 3 centuries, there have been 286 wars in Europe alone. And it made me think, man, I think of years ago going to Northern Ireland. And at the time, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland were not fighting. But to say there was peace was ridiculous, because the folks in Northern Ireland were teaching their kids just how terrible the other side was. And the same thing was going on in the South. And they were rehearsing the hurts of the past. If two people come to me and they say, look, we've had this agreement, we've had this disagreement, and but we're at peace now. I say, oh, great. Well, I'm glad you have. So have you settled it? And I've had a case where somebody said, well, no, we've not settled it, but we've decided to just bury the hatchet. Well, guess what? I think you need to dig the hatchet back up, because if you don't dig it up, it will be dug up at some point in the future. It will either be dug up and war will start again, or there will be generational hurt, as is taking place in Northern Ireland. I believe that really peace only comes when we dig up that hatchet and we turn the hatchet into a serving platter, or we turn the hatchet into some instrument of peace. Safety peace doesn't come just from the absence of fighting, but peace comes because it's who God is. So the nature of peace is what? There's the peace that comes from having a quiet and a good conscience. If you've ever lived with a bad conscience, you did something and it wasn't right, then you don't have peace. There can be peace when you're restful. You've turned over your situation to the Lord. Contrast that to somebody that's in turmoil because they're just not ready to turn the situation over to the Lord because they want it resolved, and they want it resolved the way they want it resolved. There's the peace of the surrendered will. Lord, not my will, but thine be done. There's the peace of fellowship. There's nothing more fun, nothing more peaceful, nothing more refreshing than spending time with God's people. That's why I think this time of isolation has been tough. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, boy, we miss our times of fellowship, and I do too. But despite that, I'm still living in peace. Why? Because my peace comes from the Lord. It's not a peace that is dependent on the vendor or on a phone call. Yeah, I got irate. I was annoyed about it, but in the end, I'm peaceful, even though my wife didn't see the evidence of that. So I believe that peace is one of the things that we experience when we're in fellowship with Him, because He is the Lord of peace. And some people seem to think that peace is just temporary. That's certainly what the world thinks, I guess, when you look at the statistics I gave you. But what does the Lord say? He says, I give you my peace. It's always the Lord Himself gives us peace. And I've talked before about the peace of God that passeth understanding. And let the peace of God rule in our hearts. So today, as I think about the fruit of the Spirit, peace is there. So I'm sorry, Dan, if you thought I wasn't peaceful. And maybe I wasn't, but I don't think peace just is confined to whether you are feeling uptight or not. Are you relaxed? Do you know that He's in control? And I know some of you are going through a time right now where you're just experiencing stress. So I speak peace into your heart today. The Lord is in control, and you're in His hands. And even though you're dealing with all sorts of stuff, I just pray that you'll experience His peace. We don't have to be in tranquil circumstances to have peace, right? I remember, and I've told you before, of the competition that was held for somebody to come up with a picture, a painting of peace. And hundreds of people took part in this competition, and it stirred the imagination of all sorts of people. And eventually the judging got down to the two finalists, and there they were on the platform covered in cloth. And the first painting, when the judging was going to take place, they took off the cover of the first painting, and there was this gorgeous scene of a tranquil river flowing through a wonderful meadow, and the birds were in the trees, and there in the middle of the meadow there was a little flock of sheep, and that was the artist's perception of peace. And as you looked at that painting, it would be impossible to imagine a more peaceful scene. Denise and I this morning commented as we walked through the desert, it was so peaceful. It was quiet, and the air today was heavy. It's kind of muggy today, but it was peaceful. So you think, well, how can there be a better picture of peace than something like that? So after the first painting had been judged, they went to the second painting, and the second painting was something completely different. It was a huge waterfall cascading over a rocky precipice, and you could almost feel the spray coming up, and you could almost hear the roar, the roar of thunder. But poking out from that waterfall, there was a frail little tree that somehow managed to hang on to the rock in the middle of that waterfall, and on one of the branches of that tree there was a nest, and on that nest there was a little bird, and that bird was sitting there in the midst of all of this, but the bird was at peace. And so I think that's the picture that I want to leave with you today. I just pray that even in the midst of everything that's going on, I wish I could stop the waterfall. I wish I could just stop what's going on for you, and you could experience the quiet and the tranquility that Denise and I felt out there in the desert. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to mix the desert with real life problems, but the fact of the matter is, even as that little bird was in the middle of the tumult, in the middle of all of that noise and spray, the bird was at peace. And I pray that's what you'll experience today, this week, next week. Amen. So tomorrow I'll come back with another aspect of the fruit of the Spirit. So I hope this is doing something for you. But as I'm sitting here, I'm feeling His peace, and I just pray that what I'm feeling, you'll feel also. Sure love you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. God bless you. Stay in touch. Call somebody, tell them you love them. Call somebody, tell them you're praying for them. And the Lord will use you to be an instrument of His peace in somebody else's life today. Amen. God bless you.